Good evening, my dear spiritual brothers and sisters. So this evening, we have scheduled the first part in a two-part seminar entitled The Synthesis of Science, Philosophy and Religion. Because in general life we see that there's a great deal of confusion and conflict between these various perspectives. However, reality is one bheda-abheda-tattva, non-dual conscious reality. So there is no conflict anywhere. There is only harmony. But there is some deficiency in our eyes, in our vision. You may or may not believe it. Nothing bad ever happened in the past, in the present, or will happen in the future. But due to the avidya, ignorance, due to being in illusion, we perceive ourselves in a hostile environment in this world. People, they like to do things which are friendly for the environment, but you should know that the environment is friendly to you. So that realization, that vision, can only be attained by pure consciousness. When avidya, the root of ignorance, is uprooted from our hearts. So this program was advertised as a public program. I see we have got a lot of devotees here, seasoned devotees who've been around a long time. So I beg your forgiveness and your indulgence if I speak for some very basic things this evening. But I see we also have so many persons who are new to the path of bhakti. Raise your hand if you're just coming new to the path of bhakti. Yes. Look at that. You squeeze them all out. And they're all in the back of the room. I'm really sorry about that. Maybe I should come and sit over there with you. No? So we want to discuss some basic things and resolve many of the questions, because if you didn't have questions, you wouldn't be here this evening. You're here, I know, because you are inquisitive about life. And that's a great virtue. Atato brahma jigyasa. Now I have this human form of life. I should inquire, what is the greatest thing? What is the supreme and absolute truth? So excuse me, I am not very qualified or intelligent or anything. So I'm just going to pray to my Guru and the Supreme Lord for a minute to just move my ego completely out of the way so that they may speak their message. Nam Shrestam Manamapi Sachiputram Atra Surupam Rupam Tasyakraja Muripurim Maturim Koshtuvatim Radha Kundam Girivaram Oho Radhika Madhuvasam Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Sri Gurum Tamanatosmi Gurave Gaura Chandraya Radhikaya Tadali Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tad Bhaktaya Namo Nama Anandalilamaya Vigrahaya Hema Bhaddibhyatschave Sundaraya Tasmai Mahapremarasa Pradaya Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste. Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste. Bhakta Bhida Apurada Lakshe Chiltas Kamadi Torang Komadi Kripa Maitam Shanam Prapanna Brinde Namaste Charanarvindam Brinde Namaste Charanarvindam Govinda Damodar Madhaveti Govinda Damodar Madhaveti Govinda Damodar Madhaveti Govinda Damodar Madhaveti. Everyone. Hey Krishna, Hey Yadava, Hey Saketi, Govinda Damodar Madhaveti. Shama Sundar Shikanda Shikar Smaraha Smurlim Manohara Radhikar Sakamama Kripanidhe Supriya Charna Kinkurim Kuru Tavaivasmi Najivami Tvaya Vina Iti Vikyaya Devi Tam Namaham Charnantikam. First of all, I offer my Sastang Dandavat Puspanjali, my heart like flowers, thousands and thousands of times at the lotus feet of my holy master, my supremely worshipable spiritual Gurudev, Asmadiya Paramarada Tama Guru Pada Padma, Nitilila Pravishta Om Vishnupad, Ashtotaras Tasri Rupanugacharya Varya, Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. Secondly, I bow down thousands of times at the lotus feet of my Guru's Guru, my Param Gurudev, to Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and to his Guru and all the great spiritual masters in the unbroken line going back thousands of years to Sri Krishna himself, the speaker of Bhagavad Gita. My pranam to my Guru Parampara. And finally, I offer my pranam to all of you. You are very kind to me. You have come here this evening to engage me in the service of Supreme Lord. So my pranam to all my dear brothers and sisters.
Paramahamsa Srila Gurudev Prem Prayojan Prabhu Ki.
Not actually Paramahamsa, but like a dust on the feet of Paramahamsa. It's okay. So now we begin. Thank you for waiting so patiently. So we're discussing the synthesis of science, philosophy, and religion. It is said that the human being is a rational animal. And if our rationality is not activated, is not engaged, then there's really no difference between the human being and the animal. The human being can ask the question. He's not completely, he is to a large extent, but not completely under the grip of a based instinct. Human being has some God-given intellect. So, in the Vedanta tradition, it is described that when we do vichar, deliberation on a subject, then our deliberation has 5 components. First, we identify Vishay, the subject. And then we understand that we don't properly understand that subject. So let's take the biggest subject we can think of, life. Everything. So in the midst of our struggle, our bitter struggle for survival, those who are fortunate, they have some time to stop and become introspective and think. But still, it's very difficult to find answer to the questions. What is this life? So doubts are there. Sankshaya, that's the second aspect of the inquiry. And then comes the Purvapaksha. That means a counter-argument. We have a thesis, then we have a doubt, and on the basis of our doubt, we can present the complete opposite side of our original thesis, the antithesis. Then, if we are fortunate, either by one's own inspiration or by the association who is more evolved, more advanced, more experienced, then we may be able to reconcile both sides of the dilemma, the thesis and the antithesis. So that is called Sangati. When all contradictory positions become harmonized into one whole. And that leads us to Siddhanta, the conclusion. So these 5 stages of a vichar, deliberation, they are there, they are common to persons in all stages of their personal evolution. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in his Chaitanya Shikshamrita, also in Jaiva Dharma, he has described that the human being, he goes through 5 stages in his evolution. And the way that he does vichar, in other words, the thesis, the antithesis, and ultimately his siddhanta, his conclusion, is different in each stage. And it takes time for him to have a doubt in his own conclusion and then move to the next stage. And then again he has a doubt in his conclusion and he moves to the next stage. So this is a natural series of progress. So the first stage among the souls who have taken birth as human beings, the most base stage, is the stage of the immoral atheist. The person who doesn't believe in God and also has no values, no scruples, and no conscience. Complete psychopath. Right? The immoral atheist. He doesn't believe in God. He doesn't believe there's any kind of cosmic justice. And therefore, life has no meaning. He's just striving to get what he wants at any expense, at any cost. However, persons hear his thesis of life. Yavat jivat, sukam jivat, rening kritva, gritam pibet. This is Charvak Darshan. There was an atheist in India, and he said, as long as you're alive, enjoy yourself. And you should have delicious food and eat ghee every day. Even if you have no money, just borrow the money and buy the ghee, go in debt, no problem. Because when you die, you won't have to pay it back. That's the Charvak Darshan. So this is the atheist. Then, if someone said, but we've got to have some rules, because if everyone lives like an utter barbarian, then we don't even live in a civilization, right? So it's better if we have some ground rules, some morals with which we deal with each other, and then our whole environment can be uplifted. We can develop civilization. We can become an advanced civilization, and we'll all end up enjoying even more if we have some ground rules, some ethics. So the next stage of development is the moral atheist, the person who doesn't believe in God, but he has some rudimentary ethical framework, which is really for the benefit of himself and also for others. But it's quite, let's say, transactional. It's transactional relationships with others. Then, in Sri Chaitanya Shikshamrita, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he said, someone will come along and say, look, this is all well and good saying that we have to follow some morals and ethics to have a better society. But the thing is, if people don't believe that there's a God who is watching them at all times, who has dominion over the world and who orchestrates a perfect cosmic justice, then as soon as a person who is alone and thinks no one's looking at me, he'll break his moral codes. He won't have the strength or the reason or the incentives to follow the moral codes. So it would be better, the first one is called the Kalpanik Ishwaravad, that even if God doesn't exist, it's just better if we all just pretend that he does. The idea that it's better for us if we just imagine that God exists. That's like Pascal's wager, right? Pascal's wager. He said, look, why just believe in God? If God doesn't exist, you had a happy life, feeling that everything was good, and when you die, you'll be fine. And then when you die, and if there's nothing, then there's nothing lost, but you had a happy life. And if there is a God when you die, and you believed him, and you served him your whole life, so then you'll be successful. So it's win-win. You can't lose if you believe in God. So you have the moral theist first. Actually, you can divide it into two. The one who really doesn't believe in God in his heart, but due to social conventions, he goes along with the idea. And he feels that it's a good thing. Just like, Richard Dawkins, a famous atheist, he's been criticizing religion and everything for so many years. Now he's noticing that civilization is falling apart around him. And he claims, I'm a cultural Christian. In other words, he feels, actually, it would be better if we all acted as if there were a God. He said, I like the sound of church bells on Sunday. He said, so there's the person who doesn't really believe in God, but thinks it would be a better thing. But beyond the level of just a cultural or conventional belief in God, there are persons who actually have some faith. They have a deep faith that God does exist. And there are arguments for the existence of God also that have never been refuted. They've only been misunderstood and forgotten. We'll come to those later. So now we've come to the platform of the moral theist. A person has a good ethical framework. He's socialized. He's has the socialization of his appetite, so he doesn't make a disturbance to others. And he believes in God. But he's basically just getting on with his life. He's not on fire. He doesn't really have a practice, a daily practice. He doesn't understand. He thinks that if I just get on with life and I'm a good person, when I die, I get the ticket to heaven. But a person who's more evolved realizes that actually I am in a fallen state. And I should live my life in such a way. I should have a spiritual practice of prayer, meditation, fasting, sacrifice, and devotion. And by this, perhaps gradually, I'll be purified, that I'll not be ashamed to come into the presence of the Supreme Lord. So that's the next stage, the fourth stage. That is called the devotional practitioner. Or in Sanskrit, we call sadhak. A sadhaka is a person who's doing sadhana. Sadhana means what we perform to attain sadhya, a goal of life. So sadhana is what you do. It is a practice to attain sadhya, a goal of life. And a sadhu is a person. Sadhana sadhnoti sadhu. A saint is a person who's doing an intense sadhana, intense practice, and he causes others to engage in that intense practice. And he gives guidance and adjusts and refines and fine-tunes and aligns the lives of others so that their sadhana is exactly pointing directly, exactly orientated towards their supreme goal of life. So when a person comes into the association of a sadhu, a saint, and being submissive, allows himself to conform to the principles and the practices of that saint, then that is called sadhu sangha. Sangha. Sang, samyak pain anugaman. Samyak means completely, ga, to follow. to follow completely, outwardly and inwardly. And so we can attain our sadhya, our goal. So that is the stage, the devotional practitioner, and he associates with those who are siddha, already perfect, and then he can also rise to that platform of being the perfected lover of the Supreme Being. That is called siddha, perfected person. So these are the 5 stages in the evolution of consciousness, and in each and every stage, each person has his 5 components of vichara, of deliberation. Of course, as you enter into the 4th and 5th stage, then it's understood that our power of deliberation is the corrupted and actually ineffective in regard to realizing the absolute truth. And therefore, when a person enters into the 4th and 5th stage, he leaves behind the arohapanta, that means the ascending process, the effort of self-elevation, and he tries to open himself to the descending grace. But that is not possible to, that is not something that the persons in the first 3 stages can understand. But if they come into the 4th stage, then they can pass from the purely intellectual, the vichara, the components of deliberation, and enter into the avarohapanta, the descending process of receiving revelation from above. So that takes quite some purification. Now, let's come to this question. This is the most important and foundational question for every single person. It's the crux of the matter. It's the fork in the road of our existence. Every single person at every single moment is committed to one of these positions. Either there's a God or there is not a God. And the consequences of that commitment, whether it's conscious or in many cases it's just an unconscious commitment. But the consequences of that commitment are the most far-reaching consequences of anything that you will ever do in your life. So let's first, before we address this question, and the deepest, most profound psychological commitment that we hold, let's just consider the consequences of that commitment. There's a fork in the road. Let's have a look in both directions. If you look down the path of atheism, that God doesn't exist, then generally, there are some varieties, but generally people come to the conclusion that the world is just particles in motion. As the Greek philosopher, it's not a new idea. Atomism, materialism, computationalism, it's not a new idea. Thousands of years ago, the Democritus, he posited, what is life? Oh, just atoms in the void. Everything comes about by the random collision of tiny particles. And therefore, life has no purpose. It has no telos, no teleology, no direction. It's just going on. Everything clashing, bumping into each other. So that's the result of atheism, that life has no purpose. Of course, a person who doesn't believe in God can deny the fact that life has no purpose and project and create some purpose, but that purpose is never steady. It's never steady. Throughout their life, they keep changing their mind about what they're supposed to be doing because they don't have any fixed direction. And without a fixed direction in life, you cannot have inner peace. And if you don't have inner peace, how can you truly be happy? It's not possible. So let's look in the other direction, in the fork in the road, theism. If there is a God, what does it mean? It means that an intelligent being who is all-powerful and all good and pure has made the creation and it has a purpose. Because that's the speciality of consciousness. Unconscious things just exist. They have no purposes to fulfill. You know, if your car is sitting outside and it's almost run out of petrol, it doesn't feel the necessity, I need petrol. You feel the necessity that you need. Is it called petrol here in New Zealand? Okay, good. I'll be in California next week. It will be gas. So, yeah, it doesn't feel, machines don't feel any necessity. A necessity, that necessity in Sanskrit is called Prayojan. Necessity and goal are the same word in Sanskrit. Prayojan, that's my name, Prem Prayojan. My Gurudev is so kind, he knew I was so foolish, he had to give me this name, Prem Prayojan. Means love is the goal of life, just so I don't forget. So necessity, Prayojan, this is a characteristic of spirit. Unconscious things don't have objectives. You see? So, if one is a theist and believes that God exists, that means the world has purpose, and it means that each and every one of us has a glorious prospect. It's amazing. Each and every one of us has a glorious prospect. There's something, a reason we exist, and it's something amazing. Presently beyond our imagination even. And there's a meaning to life. And to attain that glorious prospect, that's why we're alive. And if someone understands this, it completely animates them. It animates them completely with joy at every moment. Because that ultimate purpose is love of God. Now, in this world, generally people are looking for love in a dating app or something like that. Right? But whoever they meet, that person themselves is insufficient. They're deficient. They're also looking for something that they don't have. So when two deficient people meet together, it's just like a vampire-like relationship. Because they're both deficient and they're trying to get something from the other person. So that's not love. That's transactional. It's like a business deal. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. I love you as long as you do the things that I want you to do. Otherwise, divorce. So that's not love. So love does not begin until atmaramata. That means self-satisfaction. Only when we become self-satisfied, completely satisfied in the joy of the Atma, the joy of the self. After that, then there's devotion. Because devotion is causeless and unconditional, and it's not for you, it's for the other person. Love means completely to please the other person. So until we become complete and satisfied in ourselves, then there's no pure expression of devotion. In our tradition we say, Anya bilashita shunyam jnana kamatana anya bilashita shunyam. Bhakti devotion begins when there aren't any other desires, because you have the self-satisfaction. So, theism, this road, it's a shining light, all beauty and wonder is waiting for you there. And that road, if you're lucky, just death and oblivion. And if you are wrong, maybe even worse than oblivion. So, okay, those are the two paths. Now, another thing. Let's look at the concept of the self that a person has who makes that internal commitment. So, in atheism, generally, the concept of the self is something that was perhaps first voiced, or rather written down and presented as in academic sphere by René Descartes, and then later John Locke also, and that is the concept of tabula rasa. Tabula rasa means a blank slate. Yeah, please. Okay, understand. I'm trying to hypnotize everyone and you keep breaking their trance. Okay, so don't know. Only kidding. Not kidding. So, tabula rasa means blank slate. That means we're born, and myself, I'm a blank slate from the moment that I'm born. We're all blank slates when we're born, aren't we? What do you mean? We're all blank slates. And the way we are is completely shaped by just our environment and our experiences. And so, if there's any problem in my life, or even any problem with me, it's not my fault. It's everybody else's fault. So, this concept of the self, when you choose an atheistic path, because actually Rene Descartes, he was not an atheist, but he did do a lot in the period of the Enlightenment to uproot the traditional religious values. But I'm just quoting him here. He's not actually atheist, but he posited this idea, tabula rasa. And the reason why it was so destructive is because if you come to the theist side, those who believe in God don't believe that when we're born, we're tabula rasa. We're just this sweet, innocent, pristine, shining being. And everyone else is making us become distorted, ugly, bitter, and vengeful, whatever. It's the fault of the environment. No, but when we go on the theist path, then in all religions, the concept of the self is that I'm actually in a corrupt state. So, of course, in ancient Christianity, many persons believed in reincarnation, but in recent times, they don't believe in reincarnation, but they have their theological framework that says that when you're born, from the very beginning, you have tendencies to evil things. Right? And so, that's true. It's right. They're right for the wrong reasons. They will say it's a consequence of the rebellion of Adam and Eve, like that. But, there's the fallacy. You can be right, but for the wrong reasons. So it's actually correct that when we're born, we're not born at a blank slate, but rather our soul, we've lived lives before, and we've engaged in activities which have corrupted our consciousness and left impressions in our consciousness of so many bad habits. And so, of course, a child seems very innocent and everything, but gradually as their intelligence and their powers develop, then all the impressions of their previous activities are again activated. And so those who were wicked and vicious in their previous life, they become wicked and vicious in this life as well. And vice versa, those who are more kind-hearted and compassionate and empathetic, they're like that in this life. Because the soul from the previous life brings the material mind with him. And then he's born again in this life, and all those impressions and habits of the material mind are activated once again. So, excuse me, all the theistic traditions, they have this concept that we are now in a deeply corrupt state. But when atheism is there, then a person looks inside and thinks, I'm a Ishwaraham Hambogi Siddham Balavat I'm in control. I'm perfect. Okay, I made a few mistakes, but it wasn't my fault. I'm powerful and I've got a grip on life. I'm in control. So now these two concepts of the self have really profound consequences for the way that we live and the kind of society that we develop. Oh, worked that time, good. So you see, come to the column of atheism. If you think that life has no meaning and you're tabula rasa, you're born just as a blank slate, so now you're here, what do? You just look around and, well, let me find something to enjoy. Life just becomes the pursuit of pleasure and also the pursuit of power, because the power is the ability to manipulate your environment to get more pleasure. So now that might be, for the immoral atheist, it's completely self-centered. But for the moral theists, it's like, let's organize our life in such a way that we can all enjoy to the max. And we can all have some power, right? Power to the people. So they also think about it in an extended way. But one thing that they all have in common is that suffering is immoral. If you have a society where suffering is considered immoral, then you cannot have a truly spiritual and godly society. Because if you think that suffering is immoral, you look at all the suffering around you and say, well, there can't be a God, because people say God is good. And if he made the world and it's full of suffering and suffering is immoral, God's immoral. And so when you have this idea that suffering itself is immoral, then there's no room for theism to enter into the atmosphere. And so a person thinks that the highest good is economic prosperity. Because if we can all become economically prosperous, then we can secure for ourselves our enjoyment, and we'll all have some power, and so on. And so the entire society is organized around the principle of money. And that's what we have right now. The whole society is organized. All the people come together, the managers, the levers of power, to discuss economic issues. And they think that everything is downstream of the economic issues. But this is completely backwards. In Vedic society we say dharma, artha, kama, moksha. The economic issues are downstream of your piety. Once I was giving a lecture at a meeting of the BRICS. You know BRICS? The BRICS, the organization of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and plus now there's another 6 countries in there. So there I gave a speech about Dharma, explaining that piety precedes prosperity. It's the piety, it's the religious life of the people that leads to the prosperity of society, not the other way around. So, if people are not pious, if they're not devoted to God, then their situation, even their economic situation, it will gradually collapse. And that's what we're seeing right now. Now you can think that you're quite comfortable here and everything, but you are only living off the fumes of your ancestors' piety. And when they're evaporated, then it's back to jungle, chaotic jungle again. And you can see that happening in some of the major cities around the world, even right before your eyes. So I'm speaking here about the even civilizational consequences of this commitment that everyone makes deeply within the heart. So Karl Marx said the highest virtue is capital, money. Someone may say the highest virtue is beauty or intelligence or artistry. But no, if you got money, you can buy so many beautiful people. You can buy intelligent people. You can buy an artist and make him paint whatever you want. So this is the result of atheism. And it's actually a type of, of course, at the root, it's hostility to God. But it's not only hostility to God, but it's also imitating God. Why? Theologically speaking, God is Sarva Shaktiman. That means he's the possessor of all potency. Potency means potential. And that potential can do anything. By his Shakti, his potential, he can do anything. So what is money? Money is like an abstract form of potential. So when you connect yourself with money, now you're like God. You have this abstract potential that can turn into anything. It can turn into a house, it can turn into a Lamborghini, it can turn into a holiday in the Bahamas, whatever, you see. So the Shastras say, Nityati dena vittena, means one should consider money is like death. Because it inflates the ego. It makes you feel as if you're connected with your own potential energy and you can do anything. And therefore, Lakshmi should always be used in the service of Narayan. Otherwise, it destroys the person who takes ownership from that. So we should know. Isha vashamidam sarvam. Everything in the world belongs to God. It doesn't belong to us. And so everything, when we use everything in the service of God, then we become successful. If we try to own it for ourselves, then we become destroyed. So, theism. Now, what is the value system? This is very interesting. The atheistic person, for whom there's no meaning in life, his meaning is avoiding suffering, because suffering is immoral, and whatever he does is just to avoid suffering. But when a person is a theist, then he considers good and evil only in terms of alignment with the goal of life. What aligns us with our goal of life is good, and what distracts us and derails us from our goal of life, that's evil, not suffering. Suffering is fine. Why? Because suffering is corrective. Just like a small child, if they're doing something wrong, the parent may give them some discipline. And when they're small, they can't understand. They just, oh, this is painful, and start crying and complaining. But when they grow up, then they realize, oh, I am so happy that my parents were strict disciplinarians. And they infused in me some integrity and good habits. And those who are just left to run wild without any discipline from their parents, then when they're sitting in jail, they could even blame the parents for that. But in the immature state, we may not understand that suffering is restorative. It's restorative to our soul, because being spiritual beings, trapped, encased within the physical flesh and subtle mind, we have so many attachments. So when sufferings come and problems come, then it diminishes our ego that we're in control. It helps us to become humble. It helps us to become tolerant. It helps us to become detached. So that's wonderful. If there's someone you don't like and they're harassing you all the time, Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur used to say, that's your best friend. Why? Because they're teaching you tolerance. There's nothing more difficult to tolerate than our own mind. So when we sit in meditation and we began to chant our mantra and meditate on the Supreme Being, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Many thoughts come like waves to disturb us and not allow us to enter into the states of concentration, meditation, and trance, samadhi, wherein realization can be found. So when different thoughts are coming in the mind, sometimes we engage with them and forget the mantra, the meditation. And so we have to tolerate those thoughts. So in your life, all those persons who make problems from you and disturb you, they're your best friends. They're coming to teach you tolerance, so that when you chant the holy name and you meditate, you can enter into a trance and have a vision of the Supreme Lord. This is why Mahaprabhu said, Amanina Madadena. Give respect to everyone, even those who are creating conflict with you. They're actually your friends. The environment is friendly. So, good and evil are understood in terms of what is our alignment with our goal, attaining love for God. And suffering is not immoral. It's corrective, it's restorative. And it actually can be a component of helping us to become humble, more humble than a blade of grass, so that we can call out sincerely from the core of the heart. Janmaishwarya suta sribi edamana mana punam naiva hattapidatam vaiktam akinchana gochara. One famous female saint in India, Kunti Devi, she said, those persons who become intoxicated with pride in their bodily beauty, in their wealth, in their education, or in their birth in an aristocratic family with high status in society, they cannot sincerely call out the holy name. They cannot sincerely pray. Because their heart, their soul has become eclipsed by the Rahu, by the dark shadow of egotism And that's being fed by their worldly success. And so suffering and failure and difficulties, so positive. So it's a completely different value system when we come to the path of theism. Let's move along. Now, where are we? Yes, science, philosophy, and religion. We'll have to give very precise definitions, because you can't have a conversation if we're not speaking the same language. But I want to begin with pointing out that philosophy is a central point for the general persons who haven't become already absorbed on the path, the practice of pure devotion. So for those who are seeking the truth, philosophy is a central point. And one aspect of philosophy, it's called natural theology. That means using how far and to what degree can we know something about God by our own God-given intellect. So that's called natural theology. In our Gaudiya tradition, in the Garbhastuti, the Devas prayed to Sri Krishna in the womb of Devaki. Guna prakashayar anumiyate bhavan. Oh my Lord, your existence can be inferred by analyzing the products of the gunas. So one cannot know anything about the personal features of God, what he's like, what he does, what color is he, who are his associates, what is the kingdom. Nothing positive can be known, but gunai pakashar anumiyate bhavan means that the human being, by their intellect, can arrive at the conclusion of this bare fact that there must be a God. That's as far as it can go. That there's a Shrishtikarta, there's a creator. So that aspect of philosophy is called natural theology. What can a human being know by their own endeavor and thoughts? And it's just a bare fact of the existence of a creator, nothing more than that. So it's quite limited, but that's a good start. If you're atheist, if you come to that level, that's a really good start. On the other side, in religion, natural theology is also a part of religion, but it's subordinate to revelation. Because if there is a supreme unlimited being, then the unlimited cannot be known by the limited. But the unlimited would not be unlimited if he did not have the power to reveal himself to the limited. And so there are aspects of a spiritual life that we cannot know by our mundane logic. But there is divine revelation from the Supreme Being. And generally that is taken to be the scripture. In any religion, that's taken to be their scripture. So that's no different also in the Vedas. But there's some speciality about the praman, or the nature of the Vedic evidence. You know, because people, they say this is a circular argument. This is true because it's in the Vedas or the Bible. And how do you know that the Bible is true? Because it's revealed by God. But how you know God revealed it? Well, it says so in the Bible. Like that. So it becomes like a circular argument. But the Vedas are not like that. The Vedas give another concept. It's true. Shastra yonitvat. Vedanta Sutra said that the Vedas, the Vedic revelation, it comes from the Supreme Lord, and it's the only way by which it can be known. That's true. But there's another aspect to Praman, and that is that the Vedas aren't ink on a page. The Vedas are called Shruti. Shruti means that which is received through hearing. So if there is an enlightened saint and they are speaking, this sound is not Shabda Samanya. It's not ordinary mundane material sound. It's called Shabda Brahma. And what is happening is the internal spiritual realization of that saint is coming from his lips in the form of Shabda Brahma, spiritual sound. And when the disciple or the student who is submissive, who is affectionate and surrendered to his spiritual master listens with a receptive heart and a mood of service, then tasyaiti katitayata prakashanti mahatmana. That sound actually reproduces the internal vision of the saint. And that's the meaning of Shruti. Do you understand? It's maybe something foreign to you, but this is why the Vedas are evidence. They're evidence because when the surrendered disciple or student listens to the Guru about Krishna, when the sound touches his ear, it expands and he has the darshan of Krishna. And that's why philosophy in India is called darshan, because it's the transmission of direct perception, direct vision, transcendental spiritual vision. That's the meaning of Shabda Praman. It's Praman because it gives you the direct experience of what it is, because it's non-different from what it is. Abhinatwan nama namino. In the Western theology, that is called onomatodoxy. The idea that the sound vibration of the name of God is God himself. Okay, so that was a little digression for the more seasoned students here. But now, so there is philosophy, natural theology, religion has revealed theology. Now, science. What is science? Before the word science really existed or became popular, it was actually called the philosophy of nature. It was the philosophy of nature. But since the classical era, since ancient Greece, gradually the Renaissance came and the more humanistic elements came into culture. And then the Enlightenment came. And in the Enlightenment, then the philosophy of nature became somewhat contracted. It became compressed. It became low resolution. And that was deliberate. There were some reasons for this, and we'll discuss that in tomorrow's class. But I just want to move along to today's subject. And today's subject is this. I want to give you a key. This is the key to all philosophy. This is the holy grail of philosophy. If you understand this point that we'll discuss today, you will understand every philosophy, because philosophy is ultimately coming from the human mind. So at the base of philosophy is actually psychology. So I want to share with you what Vedanta, what the Vedas reveal about psychology and how the psychology of the person gives rise to their philosophical viewpoint. And how you'll be able to identify every single philosophy, even if you never heard it before, you never heard of that philosopher, and you'll be able to identify its weak points and completely deconstruct it in moments. Are you ready? Okay. Vedanta Darshan. Vedanta, anta means the end or the conclusion, and Veda means transcendental knowledge. So the Vedas discuss many subjects, but Vedanta is the conclusion. And it's called a darshan because it does not leave you with some conceptual architecture that you can just admire in an abstract way, but it actually leads us to darshan, vision of the absolute truth, of the all-beautiful, artistic, loving, adventurous, funny, romantic, supreme personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. It will lead to that darshan. But there are steps along the way, so please be patient. We'll get there gradually. Now, in Vedanta Darshan, it's described that the cause of our material existence is that we have turned our attention away from God. You see, you're conscious, we're all conscious, but we're not conscious of everything all at the same time. Our attention has a directionality, so we can direct our attention to different things. So the soul, by its nature, directs attention, full engrossment in the Supreme Being, Sri Krishna. I don't like to use this word God, because God doesn't say who he is. It's just like a position, like president. It's just a political analysis of his status, God. So from now on, I'm going to use the word Krishna, because that's what his mother calls him. No, but because Krishi bhuvachaka shabdo nashta nivriti shabdaka vachakaha chayor aikya param brahma Krishna ityabhidiyate. In the Mahabharata, the great classical epic of India, there it is said that the syllable Krish means existence, not a part of existence, all existence, nothing is left out. The totality, Purna, Krish, and it means Karshati, attractive, beautiful. And Na means Nivritti, Ananda, joy. So when these two syllables are put together, Tayoraikam Param Brahma, they indicate the highest supreme truth. The highest supreme truth is a person who is most beautiful, the basis of all existence, and the embodiment of the highest joy, which is love. Love is the highest joy. So therefore he is called Krishna. Perhaps you know, if you look in the Oxford Dictionary, there's a word there. The definition of this word is impelling beauty that inspires devotion. What English word has the Oxford Dictionary definition of impelling beauty that inspires devotion? Crickets. Charisma. So English is developed from Sanskrit. So the cognate of Krishna in English is charisma. Charisma, charisma, Krishna. And it means the same thing. Impelling beauty that inspires devotion. Krishna. Beauty and joy of love. So Sanskrit is the mother language, and all the European languages, they're called Indo-European because they're derived from Sanskrit. Now, coming back to our point here. The point is this: in Vedanta Darshan, it is said that our consciousness is directional. And in our pure state, it's directed to the Supreme Lord. But in our conditioned state in this world, that which is the root cause of our material experience and struggles of life is that our attention is turned away from Krishna. Krishna buli se jiva nadir bahimuka atayeva maya taridiya sangsara dukkha. Our attention is turned away from Krishna. Krishna surya sama maya haya andaka yahan Krishna tahan nahi maya adhikar. So one poetic example has been given that God is like the sun and Maya, illusion, is like darkness. So just consider this. What happens if you're looking at the sun? You stare at the sun a little bit. Not too long. Kids, don't try this at home. But if you look a little bit too long at the sun, when you turn away, then you have what is called the negative after image. Negative after image means where the sun was in your vision, when you turn away, now there's a hole. You're looking, but there's a hole in your vision. It's called the negative after image. It's a void. It's a nothingness. It's an emptiness. It's an abhav, an absence. And that's what happens. When the living being turns away from the Supreme Lord, at the deepest root of his consciousness, there is a negative after image. There is an abhav, an absence. It's called nirvishesha shunyavadi pastatya. Nirvishesh. It's something that is no thing. It has no consciousness. It has no variety. It has no support. And therefore it kind of exists by itself. It's a non-existence, but it kind of exists in our consciousness without support by itself. Nothing can exist without a self-existent being. God is a self-existent being. But because this negative after image is there deeply in our consciousness, that above, that is also called in Sanskrit avidya. It is the absence of awareness. It's the absence of knowledge. And it permeates all of our thoughts and concepts from the deepest level. And it causes what is called Brahm. So those of you who have studied Vedic philosophy, you'll know that a conditioned soul has 4 defects. Brahm, Pramada, Vipralipsa, Karana, Patav. So this is the actual meaning of Brahm. Generally say, the tendency to make a mistake or be an illusion. But what it actually means is this. Maya, the illusory energy, covers the soul's awareness of his own identity. And so deep down he has an emptiness, a void. And then he becomes the other aspect, that's called the avidya of Maya, the avarnatmaka shakti of Maya, the covering potency of Maya, and then vikshepatmaka, the other aspect of Maya, makes the living entity become distracted. And he's looking into the world, but deep down in his consciousness he has a void, an emptiness. And he uses that as his lens of interpretation of everything. That void in his heart becomes his lens of interpretation of everything. It's a kind of mental inertia where you just assume that the foundation of everything is a kind of unconscious emptiness. Understand? Now, I want to move on to the next point, because we're discussing in Vedanta Darshan what is the key to understanding all philosophies. In the Vedanta Sutra there are 4 chapters. And the second chapter, that chapter is about looking at all the classical philosophical systems which were in existence in those days. The logic system of Gautam Rishi's Nyaya, Vaisheshik system of the Kanad Rishi, that is the Vedic atomic theory, and the Sankhya Darshan, and Yoga, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, Jaimini Rishi's Karma Kanda. So even Buddhism and Jainism and Charvak's materialism. So all of these were classical philosophical systems. And in the second chapter of Vedanta Sutra, they're analyzed one by one and uprooted. And Vedanta gives the conclusion. So I want to give you the key, according to Vedanta and the natural commentary on Vedanta, that is Srimad Bhagavatam. That is the most elaborate and beautiful fruit of the desire tree of the Vedas. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, it speaks about this Brahm and calls it Sadrishya Brahm. Sadrishya Brahm means this: we automatically consider, we project a state of self-existence. Just as the void in our heart doesn't require support, it just exists, it floats by itself without any support. So we automatically assume that things are self-existent. They have swatantrata. They are independent. They exist independently. Now, for example, let's say you may not be thinking, I don't have the philosophy that things exist independently. But just look. You look around the room and you see there's a table here, there's a wall there, there's a mirror over there. If in your mind you're subconsciously thinking that they're just sitting there doing nothing and existing independently, then that's this Brahm. Because I'll give you another example. You know, if someone's playing music on a violin, you hear the music, and the moment the player stops playing, the music disappears. So if we're not aware, this world is the energy of God, and it only exists because the self-existent being is giving the power of existence to temporary things. And if the Supreme Lord were not at this very moment maintaining and supporting everything, it would disappear. So if someone said, well, what's the proof of God? The answer is, well, everything's the proof of God. Because nothing around us is self-existent. This argument was also given in Christian theology by Thomas Aquinas. It's one of the 5 ways, the argument from contingency. That everything, all existence is contingent on something else. But there must be something which is self-existent. So that argument is given in the first line of Srimad Bhagavatam. Janmadhyasya yatanvayaditarachasthate svibhigya surat, self-existent. Only he is self-existent and everything else is dependent existent. It's straightforward. But even say you may like have a commitment, yeah, I believe in God and everything like that. But if you are subconsciously thinking all the objects in the room are just sitting there, existing independently by themselves, and you're not aware that this is the music of God, and when he stops playing, like musical chairs, but when he stops playing, all the chairs disappear. Like that. So if you're not aware of that, then you have what is called Sadrishya Brahm. So even you can be a devotee for many years, and that won't go away until you become liberated. As soon as you're liberated, then that Sadrishya Brahm will go away. Then you don't have the 4 defects, because that's the root defect of all the other defects. Okay? So what I call this in English is mislocated hypostasis. Hypostasis means that which has primary ontological status. Understand? So in our mind, when we give a primary ontological status, this is its own foundation, independent, we're making the mistake of mislocated hypostasis. Raise your hand if you didn't understand that. Okay, I'll say it one more time. Okay. So, that which is self-existent is only God. Only God is self-existent, and all other existence depends on Him. So, hypostasis, that is the primary ontological status, belongs to God, and everything else has a secondary ontological status. You see? So, hypostasis is the Greek word, or the word in philosophy, that means primary ontological status. Now, what a person does is, in our experience, we can say that our experience can be divided broadly into two categories, subject and object. Right? We're a subject and we experience objects. That's all we know. Everyone thinks, I'm a subject and I'm experiencing objects. Subject, object. Now, when we don't give the primary ontological status to God, swarat, then we put it somewhere else where it shouldn't be. So most people put it on the world. They mislocate primary ontological status and they place it on the things of the world. So they think everything's just existing by itself and think there's no God. You understand? So they put it on the object, but you can put it on the subject, and we're gonna examine the consequences of where we locate the hypostasis. So Brahm actually means mislocated hypostasis. The psychological habit of conferring onto things a primary ontological status that they don't deserve, because we've turned our attention away from God, who is the person who deserves it. He's the only self-existent being, Swarat. Okay, I tried a second time to make it clear. Does anyone else not understand it still? Okay, I'll just say it one more time. God is the foundation of existence. He is self-existent, and all existence depends upon Him, just like the music depends on the playing of the musician. You see? That's the reality. But when our consciousness turns away from God, nothing makes sense unless something has a primary ontological status. So to make sense of life, we keep the sense of primary ontological status. But because we've turned from God, we have this negative and after image. So we think that there's something which is non-variegated, self-existing, and we project it wherever, onto the subject or the object. Mainly we project it onto the world and think all the objects around us are just sitting there, doing their thing by themselves independently of some supreme being. So that is called Brahm, and Sadrisha Brahm indicates mislocated hypostasis. Now you all understand that. If you don't understand, it's because the Brahm is there. This is why meditation is important, because by meditation you can go inside and you can see your own ignorance. Om Gana Timirandasya Gyanandana Salakaya Chakshuran Militam Dena Tasmai Sri Gurave Nama. Only a person who is enlightened and freed from that can remove our ignorance. Just like a person who's tied up, we were hearing yesterday. A person who's tied up, they can't free themselves. But a person who's free from that can untie us and make us free. That's why Guru is necessary. Yeah? Okay, now what we're going to look at is, where do we project this mislocated hypostasis? It can either go onto the objects of the world or onto what we conceive as ourself, the subject, which is really our mind. So what's the consequence of the direction in which we mislocate self-existence? Let's have a look at that. Now, one other point before we develop that in more detail, and that is the atheist trap. You see, once a person turns away from God, then this Brahm causes the corruption of the intellect. Because the intellect concepts, which are always expressed in language, it's really a second tier psychological function. The concept of self, the concept of the subject, is a first tier psychological function. And philosophy is a second, and language is a second tier psychological function. So once you've made that inner commitment, which is wrong, your philosophy can never get you out of it. So that's the atheist trap. Once we turn away and we have that Brahm, that aversion to God causes the corruption of the intellect. So the intellect doesn't function properly and it always comes to wrong conclusions. And layer after layer of cognitive errors. Layer after layer of cognitive errors. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur said, when the living being turns away from the Supreme Lord, his natural spiritual awareness becomes overlaid with an adventitious awareness, which is characterized by inconclusiveness and contradiction. So every philosophy that comes from the corrective intellect is either inconclusive, as Dostoevsky would say, an unfinished thought. A dangerous unfinished thought. It was a train of thought that was going in one direction, then just petered out and stopped. Or, if it comes to a conclusion, that conclusion is completely contradictory. Completely contradictory. And this can be fully demonstrated. I'm just trying to lay the ground today. Tomorrow, I'll explain, and with examples, how different ideas, different philosophies, and so on, you can just show, look, hey, this is an unfinished thought. Or this one is self-referentially incoherent. Because that's the nature of the adventitious consciousness, which is overlaid over the soul when he turns away from God. And has as the root of his perception this negative after-image. So in Srila Prabhupada's pranam mantra, it says, Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarni. It causes us to have impersonal and voidist ontologies. Okay, so that's the trap. Once you turn away, the intellect is corrupted. You cannot philosophize yourself out of that situation. Only a person who is unbound, who is not affected by Brahm, can remove that corruption of the intellect. Now, here we are. Sadrisha Brahm, mislocating hypostasis. If you place the primary ontological status of self-existence onto the object, in other words, the world, then you become a materialist. And if you place primary ontological status onto your own mind, you become an idealist. What's the difference? The materialists think that everything is matter, and the mind is an emergent property of matter. The mind arises from some combination of dead energy, right? That's the materialistic point of view. And an idealist is the other way around. He gives primary ontological status to his own awareness, his own consciousness, and says, oh, not that consciousness is a product of the world, but the world is a product of my consciousness. It's the other way around. And of course, both of them are completely wrong. Is that clear? What do the raise your hand. What do the materialists do?
So, you put everything onto the material.
Yes, and the result is? They give primary ontological status to matter, and therefore they think the mind is a product of matter. And the idealist gives primary ontological status to his own mind, and he thinks that the world is a creation of my mind. Right? You've met those persons. Yeah, what's up, dude? It's all an illusion. I am you and you are me, and we're all together, and I am the walrus. It's all a product of the mind. Like solipsism. So this is what happens. So I've just given some example about just a brief explanation of the entire history of recorded history of philosophy. Here you can see, let's say materialism. In the 6th century BC, you had Charvak, we mentioned his philosophy earlier. He's a materialist, just said, just enjoy your life, because when you die, it's all over. Then you have Democritus, we mentioned him earlier, who said everything is just atoms in the void. Then you have Heraclitus. Heraclitus put forward the idea that nothing stays the same. You can't put your foot in the same river twice. Everything is in a state of flux. So here's what's called a dynamic monist, that everything is matter. Matter is the basis of everything, but it's always moving. It's always moving, nothing stays the same. That's obviously not true. Because although nothing stays the same, it does stay the same, right? Because when a tree dies, another tree comes. It's just like the previous tree. Yeah? So there are forms, there are jatis, there are universals that come back again and again, even though everything has changed. So he's quite wrong, and he's been obviously uprooted by Plato and Socrates and Aristotle and others. So you have Epicurus, Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, so we have all the atheists throughout time, Charles Darwin, Karl Marx, Nietzsche. Of course, now in modern times, their death is not there yet, so there's still a chance for them. Richard, if you're watching, get in touch with me. So, this is what happens. When you place that empty self-existence upon matter, then you make matter the basis of everything, and you think that your own consciousness has come from matter. On the other side, if you place that, you mislocate the hypostasis, you have that sadrisha Brahm onto your own consciousness, then you become an idealist. So from 500 years BC, Parmenides, you know Parmenides, and more or less like his disciple Zeno, their philosophy is that there's nothing moves. There's no motion. It's all an illusion. Why? Because if there's a hare and a tortoise, right, and the tortoise gets a head start on the hare, but the hare can never catch him, because before he can catch him, he has to get halfway there. But before he can get the other halfway there, he has to get halfway there. And before he can get the next halfway, he has to get halfway there. So he always has to get halfway of the last distance that's remaining. So he'll never get there. Right? So actually nothing moves. It's a complete illusion. It's all in your mind. And there's only the oneness. So he's very much like Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna is the Buddhist guru of Madhyamic Buddhism. And that Madhyamic Buddhism is a impersonalist philosophy. Later we see Plotinus, his ideas were also Greek philosopher Plotinus, were very similar to the impersonalism of Adi Shankaracharya. So though Buddha rejected the Vedas, Shankaracharya accepted the Vedas, but he taught a kind of disguised pseudo-Buddhism on the basis of twisting the meaning of the Vedas. So all of these, they're idealists who say that they place the ontological status on the consciousness, and so all variety is an illusion. Then you have Shankaracharya. Now Immanuel Kant, of course, he was a Christian, but he was an idealist. And so Hegel, Schilling, Schopenhauer, Alfred Whitehead, Martin Heidegger, the phenomenology, Martin Heidegger, brilliant stuff. When I was a kid, I remember a long time ago, when I was a child, I saw one TV show. It was Monty Python. And they did a skit. The skit was called International Philosophers Football. You know that one? International Philosopher? So it comes up like Match of the Day with the big stadium. And it's Greece versus Germany. I'm just seeing all the names of these German philosophers. I remembered this just crossed my mind. So there's a football match between Greece versus Germany. So first the Greek team come on, Socrates, Plato and everything. They come on one by one. All these Democritus, Heraclitus, Epicurus, the whole team comes on. Then the German team comes on. It's Martin Heidegger and Wittgenstein and Immanuel Kant and so on. So they come on. And then the judge, the referee comes on. It's Confucius, trying to keep everything in balance. So he comes on and he puts the ball down and he blows the whistle. And when they blow the whistle, then everyone's just like looking at the sky, scratching their head, leaning on their hand. It's like nothing is happening. So obviously the person who made the sketch, they had the experience of going to Cambridge and Oxford University. And when you're young and you study philosophy, it's just like an endless array of millions and millions of ideas and nothing's conclusive. It's like it's not going anywhere. And so they made this funny sketch that it's a man and the ball is just sitting in the middle and everyone's just walking up and down, wondering about, pondering and wondering, nothing's happening. So philosophy doesn't have to be like that. If you come to Vedanta, you can make sense of everything. Because in the end, who is it? Archimedes suddenly goes, Eureka! I found it, and decides to kick the ball to Socrates, and he puts it in the goal. He scores a goal. So Socrates is not on the list. You know why? Why is Socrates and Plato and Aristotle not on the list? Why is Augustine and Thomas Aquinas not on the list? Right, because they come to the conclusion that there's God. You see? They place the primary ontological status where it's supposed to be. They don't do mislocated hypostasis. You see? But there's still some Brahm left over. We'll come to that tomorrow. It's a bit of a journey. Okay, so, but you get the idea that all these persons, they've written volumes and volumes of books. The libraries are full of them. And it's so bewildering which is right or which is wrong. But when you understand Vedanta, you will identify that this person has done the mislocated hypostasis. And that's at the root of his philosophy. And therefore, on the basis of this corrupted intelligence, he's created so much speculation. Because he is afforded the status of self-existence to something which is obviously not self-existent. You see? If you put the self-existence on your own consciousness, that means you're the foundation of everything. Okay. Then why can't you control the universe? If you're the foundation of the universe, to be Swarat, self-existent, means everything's under your control. So the very fact that everything is not under the control of your consciousness means that you are not hypostasis. You are not a self-existent being. You're a dependent existent being. You understand? So that side, they all get refuted. And on the other side, no material thing is self-existent because we see everything is contingent. Everything that you can see is coming and going. It's leaving existence at each moment. And of course, the Srimad Bhagavatam said, and I explained this perhaps in a class a couple of days ago, in Srimad Bhagavatam it said, Vikara kyayamanopi pratyag atmanam antara na nirupyostanorapi Syat chitsama atmavat. Narad Muni explains that the base level of existence is either, we don't know what it is because our microscopes can't go that deep. We don't know what's at the bottom. But what we can say is the last thing that exists either has form or it doesn't have form. Right? Say that because there's only two options. The last thing that exists either has form or doesn't have form. If it doesn't have form, it's a formless thing, then where do all the forms come from? There must be a transcendent being who activates that potential to make the potential, the formless potential, take on the forms. So if you're an atheist and you say there's no God, but you can say the base level of matter is either with a form or without a form. If it's without a form, then actually there must be a God. And if there is a form on the base level of matter, well, it turns out there's also a God. This is called I call this the atheist dilemma. It's spoken by Narad Muni in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Why? Because if the last particle must be indivisible. Because if it were divisible, then it wouldn't be the last particle. The part would be the last thing. So the last thing is indivisible. And what is indivisible is also eternal. And what is indivisible and eternal must have some form because it's the basis of all the other forms. But there's a question, why does it have the form it has? It can't have a form because it's acted upon by other things. Because it's the cause of all other things. And therefore its form must be a product of its own will. Of its own will. And when your will results in your form unmediated, there's unmediated will your will is connected with reality, unmediated, that's called omnipotence. So Narad Muni said, Satyat Chit Sama Atmavat. If you propose that there's some indivisible particle at the bottom of everything, it must be eternal, it must be indivisible, akhanda, and it must be conscious and omnipotent, and that's indistinguishable from the notion of God. You see, so that's the atheist dilemma given by, I spoke in detail on this a few days ago, that we don't know what the basis of existence is, but it either has a form or it doesn't, and it doesn't matter which one you choose, they both lead to the existence of God. So here, we're just pointing out, idealism is obviously not true, and materialism is obviously not true. Now, a great saint named Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he raised this point that philosophy has basically two strands, materialism and idealism, and the function of philosophy is to bring all persons on either side gradually towards the center. Gradually towards the center. So there are some philosophers in the center, and we could say Immanuel Kant, he's not an extreme monist like Buddha, Nagarjuna, Shankaracharya. He is moving from idealism towards the center, and the center is theism, and that is where the self-existence, the hypostasis is not mislocated, it's placed where it should be, in the self-existent supreme conscious being. So that is the entire history of philosophy. The entire history of philosophy is that due to turning away from God, the intellect becomes corrupt. We have a deep in our consciousness, a void that is unsupported, and it gives us the impression of things self-existing. We can project it onto the subject or the object because that's all we know, and by this we become materialists or we become idealists. And then the debates are going on between the philosophers, and by their debates, some philosophers, they actually, in one part of their life, they're on this side, and another point of their life, they're on this side. And what is that due to? The uncontrolled mind, the restless mind. So we're moving on to the next point. So just to Brahm here. So just to summarize, mislocated hypostasis. Materialism means the mind arises from the world. Idealism means the world arises from the mind. And they're both wrong, but they both get something right. The world does arise from the mind, but not yours. The world arises from the mind of God. And that's the synthesis. That's a thesis, that's antithesis, or the other way around, that's a thesis, that's the antithesis. But the synthesis, we discussed at the beginning, remember? Thesis, antithesis, and the synthesis, which is correct, and that is theism, that yes, the world is a thought in the mind of God. Mahavishnu, he's lying in the causal ocean, and in yoga nidra, and all the universe is manifest. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, this is the project of philosophy. You're either on one side or the other. And by discussion, by investigation, by vichar, deliberation, the human being may arrive at the central point that God is the foundation of existence. And that's as far as the human intellect can take anyone without revelation. The actual details of God, they have to descend. Because, as it said in Srimad Bhagavatam, Gunai Prakasha Anumiyate Bhavan. Just oh my Lord, only the bare fact of your existence can be inferred by looking at the world. That's as far as you can go. Because reason cannot generate its own premises. You know, logic and reason is based on premises, but our premises are derived from sense perception. Sense perception of the world. So you can only go to that point of a bare, a raw, theism that God exists, but more than that cannot be known. Okay, so Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur also makes another comment, and that is that once a person becomes aware that the world is a thought arising from the mind of God, then his entire existence is dematerialized. You understand? The world is gross to the person who projects the hypostasis onto the world. But when we place it onto God, everything becomes dematerialized. Because everything is God's energy. the world becomes beautiful, it becomes in harmony, and every help is coming to us from all directions. This is a Krishna consciousness. Very rudimentary first step of Krishna consciousness. So now we come to this point, the unsteady mind. Due to the restlessness of the mind, the souls in their life, they're oscillating between materialism and idealism. That's the nature of this. When we turn our attention away from God, we become overlaid by adventitious awareness, which is characterized by it's inconclusive and contradictory. These are the exact words of Prabhupada Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur. So, how can we, you see, even if you accept the existence of God, because the mind is still not fully in equilibrium, then the remnants of Sadrisha Brahm, of mislocated hypostasis, are still there. You see, that's the Kanishta Adhikari stage. But when the mind becomes steady, Ekagrata Chitta, that stage is called Nishta, steadiness. Then those misconceptions, they disappear largely. So, in the center, all the philosophical effort is to go from the edges into the center to understanding Swarat. Only the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, is self-existent and we are dependent existent. And so because we are dependent existent, it is our natural function to be the servants of that Supreme Being. So our philosophy of Bhakti Yoga is not just a sectarian dogma. It is just, that is the fabric of reality. The very fabric of reality is such that that is our position. Have you heard of a great saint named Bali Maharaj? And Bali Maharaj, yeah. No, what does Bali mean? Bali means an offering which is given in a sacrifice is called a Bali. So he's called Bali Maharaj to remind us that our very internal existence, our soul, we are constitutionally, by our nature, Bali. We are sacrificial beings. Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shantim brichati. In other words, a sacrifice isn't giving things to God. The actual Bali is you are the Bali. Sarva dharman parityajya mamekam shanabraja. You are the offering. You are the sacrifice. And when we sacrifice ourselves completely, Sharnagati, Atmanivedanam, then our true divine nature is activated. And that true divine nature is called Bhakti Yoga. Dynamic devotion. Understand? And that Bhakti Yoga is expressed through the engaging all the senses in the glorification of the Supreme Lord, beginning with chanting the holy names. And so it's vital, these philosophical points, they may seem to be very abstract or distant, but if you will chant, you will see everything that I've said, you'll see it with your soul's eyes directly. So it's if a person by nature, they're not a great philosopher or academic or scholar or anything, it's not a problem. Bhakti Yoga Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Dhyanatyasu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayada Huitukam. Simply by engaging in Bhakti, when you engage your senses and chant the holy name, serve Krishna, serve the spiritual master, then all knowledge and detachment from the world, all enlightenment comes hoituki, automatically, spontaneously. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So it's most important. I'm recommending for everyone, you can get from our devotees a rosary, a mala, and you can begin chanting every day your own private personal meditation, whereby you can stabilize your mind and bring your focus into the middle and connect with God and animate. The soul will become animated by that yoga. That means communion, connection consciously with the Supreme Lord. So chanting is very important. Perhaps you know I wrote a book called First Aid for Chanting the Holy Name. Because in this world we're all like roadkill. Yeah, we need first aid. So many offenses, so many problems and everything. What can we do right now? You know, the complete solution is you just leave everything, go into Vrindavan and stay with pure Vaishnavas. But if you can't do that today, if you can't do that till like Kartik, like October, you'll come to Vrindavan during Kartik. But if you can't do that till like, then what can we do right now to adjust ourselves that we can get closer to Krishna in the form of the vibration of his holy name, the Mahamantra? So as soon as you pick up your bead bag, then you'll find that we're faced with 15 at least, but I've just summarized 15 obstacles to chanting. So the first one is we're trying to turn our attention to the Supreme Being, but our mind is preoccupied with mundane things. Okay? The next one is the absence of introspection. We can't go inside. The mind is pushing us out to external things. The next one is attachment to the material identity. Even if we turn our consciousness inside, we still think, I am whatever, Raju, or John, Peter, Natalia, whatever your name is or wherever you're from. I'm from New Zealand, I'm from Venezuela, I'm from India, I'm from Gujarat. So, holding on to the material identity, this is an offense to the holy name. Aham mamadi parano namni sopya paradakrit. And then, more than that, let's say you forget, you give up your identity. Yeah, I'm none of these things. Naham vipro nacha naprati napit. But you can still hold on to the concept of being the doer of material activities. Then there's restlessness of the mind. And then there's impatience. If you sit and you chant for an hour without moving, it's like, nothing's happening. I should stop. No. Stay. Keep chanting. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. More than that. But don't get restless. Impatience is there. And then the next thing is a material conception of the holy name. You can think that the holy name is a material sound. Let's say you think the holy name isn't a material sound. But if you think that your tongue can produce it, that's tantamount to thinking that the holy name is a material sound. So you can inadvertently think that the holy name is a material sound, even though you wouldn't admit it, but you do. Atashi Krishna Namadi Nabhavat Graham Indriya. Holy name is not accessible by the material senses. So there's some science behind this. This is called Nam Tattva, the principles of chanting. So I'm not going into detail now. So the miscategorization of transcendence, and then indifference, complacency, indulgence in imagination, speculating, making like a Disney World image of the Vrindavan in your mind, emotional disconnection, lack of confidence in the holy name, a spirit of independence, and of course impersonalism, that we don't relate to the vibration of Krishna's name as an actual person. Nam Prabhu. He's Nam Prabhu. He's a person. So all of these 15 things, they have to be removed. So I've written a book on this, First Aid for the Holy Name. I'm sure it's available at our book table. There it is. Yeah, you can pass the other ones as well. Okay. So this is it. It's not very big, but I recommend it. And I think I'll speak on this also tomorrow. I'll divide the class into 2 parts tomorrow. We'll do the first part of the class will be on the synthesis of science, philosophy, and religion. And the second part of the class will be just practical things, how to meditate every day and overcome our internal obstacles. So you can have a preview of what's coming tomorrow here, if you like. And I just want to mention, last year it was Prabhupada Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur's 150th anniversary of his birth. So there was some of his works, even after 150 years, they'd never been translated into English. This one, probably because it was so hard to translate. But so this is called Gaudiya Darshan. It's Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur's own speech at the Albert Hall, Calcutta in 1929 on Prayojan Tattva. And it's really amazing. It's It's not for the beginner level, Kanishta Adhikari. It's the Madhyam Adhikari type of Katha. So it's kind of next level, but it's a very wonderful book. I've written a commentary as well. So I recommend read the commentary first, then go back to the book, and it will be less of a challenge. And then this one's for everyone, including the children. This is for adults and children of all ages. Another Katha of Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur. It's called Vedic Wisdom Tales, and it's 34 short stories from Katha Upanishad, Kena Upanishad, Chandogya Upanishad, Mahabharata, many episodes from Srimad Bhagavatam. Many of the episodes are quite famous, but in his characteristic style, at the end of each story, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur extracts an essence from it, which is like being run over by a train. Really powerful and shatters all of our illusions. So that's a very interesting book of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur as well. So all three, they're available at the... I'm sorry about this commercial break, but it's this Katha of our great teachers is very powerful, very nourishing, and life-changing, actually. So I encourage everyone to get those and study those. So I'm just going to complete here. Tomorrow, part 1 will be the continuation, and we'll try to synthesize the various human disciplines of science, philosophy, and religion, and art will be added tomorrow as well. And in the second part, we'll just be discussing practical advice, how to really go deeply into your daily japa meditation. So thank you for your kind patience. Hare Krishna.